Jan, herzlich willkommen. Ich freue
And
mich
Jan,
riesig, dass
thanks
du
for
da
coming.
bist.
So happy to have you here.
Ich darf sagen, das heutige Meetup,
Well,
wir
today's
berichten ja immer sehr
meetup
intensiv über Cases mit AX
is very
Semantics
special.
und wie
We
unsere
like
Klienten
to tell our
automatisiert Texte
customers how they
erstellen. Und ich bin
can
ja auch
set
immer
up and
gerne
generate
Gastgeber für solche
text
Veranstaltungen,
using
weil ich
AX
einfach schön
Semantics. And I
finde,
love to
wenn
be a
die
host because I
Erfolge, die unsere
love to
Kunden
show
haben, wir
the
hier teilen können
success
und das
of
auch entsprechend
our clients
präsentieren.
have. Today, we
Heute
have a
hat es
little
einen
bit of a
etwas anderen
different
Inhalt und ich finde das aber
content, which
besonders
is
spannend,
no
zwar
less fascinating,
hochspannend.
quite on the contrary.
Denn
Because what
was
we
wir ja
see
immer wieder
over
erleben,
and
ist,
over
dass wir
again is that we have
unterschiedliche Kundengruppen
different
haben. Die einen,
customer
die
groups. We have
tatsächlich AX
those who
Semantics selbst
directly
anwenden,
apply
das heißt
AX
als
Semantics.
Anwender
They
sich selbst
train
ausbilden
themselves to become
über
appliers
entsprechende
and they use
elektronische
electronic training
Ausbildungsverfahren, ein bisschen
methods.
Training und
We
Übung
do a little
zusammen mit
bit of
ihrem
training
Customer
together with the
Success,
customer
dann ihre
success to
Projekte
help them
realisieren und
realize
auch
their
entsprechend
projects and implement them
umsetzen.
accordingly,
Das
which is
gefällt mir
something I
natürlich
love.
sehr
On
gut.
the
Auf der
other
anderen
hand,
Seite haben wir
we have
Kunden, die
other
sich
clients
unsere
who
Managed Service
have our managed
Provider an
service
Bord holen
providers on board with them,
und
and
gemeinsam mit
together with the
den Managed
managed
Service
service
Providern
providers, they use the
die Software
software in order
nutzen, um
to
ihre
obtain
Ziele
their
zu
targets.
erreichen.
In both
In beiden
cases,
Fällen
as a matter
gibt
of
es aber
fact,
tatsächlich, wenn
if
man
you
ins
look at project
Projektmanagement
management,
schaut,
there's some special
Besonderheiten. Also
features.
es ist
Not
nicht alles
everything
Projektmanagement,
is project
was
management,
an generellem
which we have,
Projektmanagement-Know-how da ist,
or not
direkt
everything in
übertragbar
project
auf
management is
AX.
directly
Und darüber hat
translatable
sich der
into
Jan Gedanken
AX.
gemacht
Jan
und
has
hat
given
dazu
this some
ein
thought. He's
Schulungsprogramm
put together a
aufgebaut.
training
Ich
program,
greife
and
einfach
Jan,
mal vor,
I
Jan, es gibt
will
ein
already
White
say
Paper,
this.
wenn
There's
ich
a
richtig im
white
Bilde
paper.
bin.
Is
Es
this
ist
the
heute
release day
Release Day
today?
zu diesem
Well, the
White
white
Paper.
paper will be released next week, and participants of this meetup will be
Großartig.
sent that white paper. So who's registered for this meeting will be handed that over in English and German. Okay, so
Das
that
heißt, da
means
gibt es auch
there's a
ein White
white
Paper zu
paper
den, ich sage jetzt einfach mal zu der
on the project management
Projektmanagement-Theorie,
theory
die du im
that you've
Rahmen von
developed in
AX
the context
Semantics
of AX
entwickelt hast und
Semantics
auch
and that
entworfen
you
hast
have
und von der ich persönlich sehr
developed. I'm
überzeugt
very
bin.
much convinced
Und auch, ich
of
hatte dir das
it.
im Vorfeld schon
And I
berichtet,
already said this
ich habe ja Feedback von
in the
einzelnen
run-up to the
Kunden
meeting, I
erhalten, auf
received
das,
some
was ihr da
feedback from
entwickelt habt.
customers
Und ich
on
muss
what you've
sagen,
developed. And I can
weiter so,
only
ehrlich
say,
gesagt.
you
Und
know,
ich will auch gar nicht
keep
mehr
on
allzu lange
working
auf
on
die Folter
this,
spannen.
continue down
Sehr
that
gut.
pathway.
Also Erfolgsmessung von Text,
So,
trägt es bei
success
zum
measurement of text.
Geschäftserfolg?
Does this contribute to
Sind Sie
business
sich dessen
success?
bewusst? Messen Sie es sogar?
Are you aware of this?
Ich
Do you
glaube, das
measure
sind so
this?
ganz wesentliche Punkte, die uns interessieren
That's
und die sicherlich für
absolutely relevant points
nächste
that we're
Woche für
interested
den
in
nächsten Termin dann
and
auch
that we
spannend sind.
will take
So,
with
Jan,
us
ich habe jetzt alle
as a
lang genug
result
auf die
into the
Folter gespannt.
next
Ich glaube,
meetup. So
inklusive dir.
Jan,
Und ich würde einfach
I
sagen,
would
the
now
stage is
love to
yours.
leave the
Gerne in
stage
Deutsch.
to
Wir haben
you. You're
Simultanübersetzung.
welcome
Sie
to
wissen, wie
speak
Sie die
German. We have a
englischsprachigen Kanäle
simultaneous
erreichen.
translation
Ich
here, and
wünsche
you know
ganz viel
how to use the
Spaß.
English channel.
Jan, 20,
So
25
enjoy,
Minuten und
everyone.
dann gehen wir
Jan, you have
direkt nochmal
20
in
to
die
25
Diskussion.
minutes,
Vielen
and
Dank
then
erstmal.
we'll start the discussion. Thank
Wunderbar,
you.
20, 25
Great,
Minuten habe
great,
ich
lovely.
das.
So I've got around
Finden wir
20
ein.
minutes.
Genau,
That should be
danke Simon
fine.
und danke Heike
So
für die
thank you,
Einleitung.
Sign. Thank you,
Da war ja auch
Heike,
schön,
for
dass
this
es
kind
so
of
eben
introduction.
Unterscheidung zwischen
So we've
Kunden, die
already
aktiv
learned
selber
some
umsetzen
background,
und
the
Managed Service Provider, die praktisch
distinguishing
für
or
euch
separation of
umsetzen.
clients who do
Jetzt
their
hier
own implementation
einmal
and
ganz schnell die
those who
Sanevos. Wer auch immer die
implement
Bilder ich. Ich
projects
bin
for
einer
others.
der
I am
Gründer der
part of
Sanevo GmbH
Sanevo. I'm one of
und
the
wir
founders of
arbeiten schon
Sanevo
länger mit
GmbH
AX
Limited
Semantics.
Company, and we've
Selber
been working
persönlich
with
von der
AX
Historie
Semantics for some
her
time.
habe ich die klassische
Personally,
angewandte IT
I'm a
gelernt.
classical
Also
applied IT
ich habe wahrscheinlich
engineer.
eine
That's my
Mikrowelle bis hin
background.
zur
And
Cloud-Applikation
from
alles
the
programmieren
microwave to the cloud application, I can
und habe mich dann
code
mit der
just about
Zeit spezialisiert und auch
anything,
bin
but I
auch stark
specialize
interessiert für
with
den
time.
sprachlichen Bereich, Sprachverarbeitung, Sprachgenerierung.
And I have
Wenn
specialized
man
in
da
language
in dem Bereich in
generation in the
Deutschland lebt, dann
meantime.
kommt man an
So
dem
if you live in
Design einfach nicht
Germany,
vorbei.
then you won't get around
Zwangsläufig beschäftigt man sich dann
Symes
irgendwann mit
company
dem
and
Thema, wie
AX
generiere ich
Semantics
Sprache.
because
AX
you need
Semantics macht das
to
unglaublich gut für
generate
die
language.
deutsche
AX
Sprache, da kommt
Semantics
man nicht
does
drum
this so
rum und
well
das
for
war
the
auch mein
German
erster
language. You can't
Touchpoint
get past it.
meiner vorherigen
And this was my
Tätigkeit.
first touch point
Da
from
war
my
ich selber
previous
noch
job,
Kunde in der
where I was
Vergangenheit
a
und
client
habe
in the
AX
past.
Semantics eingeführt,
And I
um
used to introduce
Finanzberichte zu
AX
automatisieren.
Semantics to
Jetzt
automate
hier ganz schön,
financial
hier haben wir einmal
reporting.
aufgeführt E-Commerce Publishing
So I
Reporting.
used
Das ist der
to
Reporting-Teil,
do
den machen
commerce
wir
publishing
auch.
reporting. That's the
Unser
reporting part,
Fokus
which we
liegt aber
also do,
stärker auf
but
dem
our focus is
E-Commerce-Bereich,
rather on
um Produktbeschreibungen
e-commerce
zu generieren.
in order to
Letztes Jahr
generate product
waren auch
related
schon echt coole
text.
Events.
Last year we
AXCD
had some cool events.
2020, Tanja
AXCD
lässt sich definitiv, da haben wir auch
2020,
schon über
Sign, you might
das
remember
Thema
that
Quality
one.
Assurance
We
gesprochen.
spoke
Wie kann
about
ich die
quality
Qualität von meinen
assurance. How can
Projekten
we make
sichern?
sure quality quality of our project continues to be the right one. And today, as said, we'll speak about project
Persönlich
management.
unterscheide ich da zwischen
Me personally, I
verschiedenen Projekten.
distinguish
Es gibt
between a number of
einerseits
projects. We have
große
the
Projekte, praktisch
big
das
project as
Vorhaben an
such, the big endeavor, and then there's the software project. So that's the active IT implementation, the coding part of it. That's what we also call project usually. And we looked into both things, project management for the larger context, as well as for the smaller project. And we will distinguish between the two.
Wir haben uns bei Sanevo
So at Sanevo,
damit beschäftigt,
we've been dealing with the way we can put together an IT project in the context of language. And IT project management means software design and software development. Software design, just picture this as the organization and structuring of software. We speak of software when at AX Semantics we code something, when we use our logics, when we do retrievals, data transfers, etc. That's the area where we do our coding, and the structure around it is software design to me. Software development is what's inside the structure, implementing that. So that's what we focus on, that's where we're strong. We have an IT engineers team, and beyond IT, we also offer service packages. Our focus is on IT, project management, and software architecture, but also on seminars and trainings, coachings, because we're convinced that if we get across the knowledge that we generate, then the other customers and partners of AX Semantics will be happier too.
Die Pains,
So what's our common difficulties? When you look at these white dots, you might think that this is familiar to you. You might have found these difficulties yourselves. And I also had them when I started with AX Semantics, but also with any other programming language. It is normal when you start something new, like you don't know yet what's the things you can do with the structure, what structures can you use, what templates can you use in order to build up a good software organization later on. Back then, in my former job, we used to call this a spaghetti monster. So the project doesn't have to be a spaghetti monster. When you have the spaghetti monster, which means you want to generate text, you want to describe your products, you want to say how the weather was, you want to say how much fine dust particles were in the air in Stuttgart. And the more you put in, the bigger the spaghetti monster becomes if you do not have a set structure on how to manage your projects. So hand in hand with that goes the following. If we split our projects into pieces and then we want to expand them into a number of directions, then we do not have many reusable code components. And here's a different example. For example, if I want to do something in an Excel spreadsheet, I do not code this for myself. I take a look at the templates there are, and I take a look at whether the template can do that for me. And then when I want to design something, for example, when I want to use a win-win post, then I don't want to design the picture, but I need to find a template. And this is something that we've also looked into in the context of AX Semantics projects. This is where we found some reusable pieces that you can reuse if you wish to. In order to address these problems, we took the time and thought about how to optimize this internally. We did our improvements and then transformed this into guidelines and models that we can use in the context of trainings and apply.
Wir kommen daher
Okay, so
und stellen uns hier erstmal die
let's
Frage, was ist
come
eine
to the next
Softwarearchitektur?
part. So what
Vorher
is a
darüber
software
gesprochen, was
architecture? In
ist
the first place,
Software-Design,
we
das ist die
spoke about what
Struktur
software
drumherum.
design was. We said this
Das
is
Thema
the outside structure.
Softwarearchitektur, wenn
and
man
software
denkt bei der
architecture.
Bauarchitektur denkt man an
Well,
Häuser
thinking of architecture,
beispielsweise,
you
ja,
might think
Gebäude.
of
Also ein
buildings,
Architekt, der entwirft
houses. The
Muster,
architect
wie ein
designs
Haus gebaut werden soll,
templates, patterns
wie ein
on how
Bahnhof
to build
gebaut
a
werden soll,
building,
etc. Und ein
a train
Softwarearchitekt
station,
überlegt sich,
etc.
wie eine
And a software
Software
architect
gebaut werden soll.
thinks about how they can build a
Wenn ich dran denke,
software.
ein Hausbau, gut, ich brauche einen
Let's think of a
Grundrissplan, ich
building. Well,
brauche
we need the floor
Bauzeichnungen
plan,
für Wasser,
we
für
need some
Strom
drawings
und so
on where
weiter
the
und so
water
fort. Ja,
supply will come in,
habe
where
ich
the
diesen
power supply will
Lageplan.
come in.
Diese
And
mache
then
ich zuerst.
I've
Ich
got
plane
this
zuerst, wie
floor
soll mein
plan, I
Haus
do this
aussehen.
first, and I
Dann lege ich das
design an
Fundament,
outside
dann
shape, then I
lege ich
lay the foundation,
Tragelemente
then
und
I
dann zieht
put
das
in the
Ganze hoch auf das
supporting
Dach und fange dann ganz am Ende an zu
structures,
sanieren
I
und
go
das
up
Ganze
to the
noch schön
roof,
zu
and
machen.
in the
Das
end, I
ist
start
ein
embellishing
Prozess,
the
der
facade.
bis
So
zum
this is
letzten
a
Grad
process
geplant wird und weiter
that
läuft. Ich muss
is
das
planned
sanieren, das
into the
renovieren. Ich
details,
brauche
down to the
nicht wieder
details.
Fertigplan am Anfang.
So
Aber was die Softwarearchitektur eben auch
with
macht, ist
regard to
erster gehen, ich
software
brauche einen
architecture,
Grundriss und
first
von
of
diesem
all, we need a
Grundriss
floor
heraus baue ich
plan
dann
too.
auf.
And when
Diesen
we have
Grundriss
that
kann ich
floor
natürlich
plan, we can
nur
set up a project.
definieren
But
und
this
designen,
floor
wenn ich
plan can
schon
only be
eine gewisse
defined and
Projekterfahrung
designed
habe, wenn ich schon
if
verschiedene
we've
Projekte
already got
gesehen
the
habe und
experience
wenn
in
ich gewisse
projects, if we've seen
Richtlinien und
previous
Regeln hernehme,
cases,
um
if
diesen
we know
Grundbaustein zu legen.
what we need to do in order to lay
Was
the
Softwarearchitektur auch noch
cornerstone.
ist,
There's
und da
something
freue ich
else
mich
that
gleich, aber das
software
ist nicht,
architecture
da kann ich
stands
keine
for.
gute Parallele zur Architektur ziehen,
And this is where I can
ist,
compare with
Softwarearchitektur
architecture,
beschreibe
is
ich
that
auch
software
Beziehungen
architecture
zwischen
describes
Softwarekomponenten.
relations between software
Das
components.
klingt jetzt an der Stelle wahrscheinlich auch ein
It
wenig
might
abstrakt, aber
sound a
letzten
bit
Endes, was ich mache, ist,
abstract
ich
at this
definiere
point, but what we
Hierarchien,
do
ich definiere
is we define
verschiedene Leute, die eine
hierarchies
Aufgabe
and we
haben
define
und
elements
diese
that
Aufgabe
have their
kann
own
beispielsweise
tasks.
sein, ein
A
Ergebnis zu
task can
liefern an
be
eine andere
delivering a
Komponente.
certain
Kann vielleicht
result
auch sein,
to
dass ich
another
verschiedene
component. And it
Komponenten
might well be
strukturiere. Aber
that
am
we
Ende des
structure a
Tages
number
gibt es
of
eine
components,
Relation.
but at the end of the day,
Beispielsweise die
there's a
Komponente
combination.
A
For
erhält
example,
einen
component A
Auftrag von Komponente B und
receives
Komponente
an
B
order from
liefert das
component B, and
Ergebnis dieses
component B
Auftrags an
delivers the
Komponente A
result
wieder
of the
zurück.
order to component
Das ist
A. That's what
Softwarearchitektur.
comes back.
Die
This is software
Struktur und die
architecture,
Relation.
the structure and the relation.
So, jetzt rede ich relativ
So
lang und
now,
breit über Software Design,
I've been going on about
Softwarearchitektur.
software
Ich möchte mich damit
designs
nicht
and
einschränken. Das ist die
architecture. I
theoretische
don't want to
Grundlage.
bore
Wir
you with
werden
this.
später
This
auch
is the
entsprechend reinspringen und
theoretical
gucken, wie sieht das konkret
settings and
aus.
the basis,
Für
and
mich
we'll
ist es
look
wichtig,
into what
dass
this means
einmal
in
das als
practical
Basiswissen
terms,
zum
but I
Text
just
vermittelt
wanted to
wird,
lay this foundation of
dass wir
knowledge
zum
with
Gleichen
you,
sprechen, dann wenn wir das
so we're
Projekt sehen
sure
oder
we're
haben
on
wir
the
einen
same
Aha-Moment, wo ich
page.
sage, hey,
And so
so in
we're
etwa habe
sure
ich das
as
schon
we
mal
speak
gemacht.
about the
Ja,
hands-on
vielleicht tun wir das schon
examples,
heute schon.
you know what I mean when I say I've
Bestätigen
done
mich
this
auf
before.
Softwarearchitektur, ja. Das ist
I
jeder bewusst.
am a specialist in software
Oder
architecture.
ihr
Not
merkt, okay, ich
everyone
habe da
maybe
vielleicht
knows what that is,
Business mal anguckt, etwas, wo ich mich
or
verbessern
else
könnte.
you might find
Das
that
kann
there's
sein.
something you might want to optimize.
Es gibt in dem Bereich ein paar gute
So
Praktiken. Die habe
here's
ich der
some
Vollständigkeit
good
ganz einfach hier mal noch mit
practice
aufgelistet. Das
examples,
ist
which I've
aus der
also listed
Softwareentwicklung
here.
heraus. Also wenn
So
ich jetzt
from
dann
software development,
an große Firmen denke, ja, Facebook,
thinking of
Google,
big companies,
Amazon,
Facebook, Google,
auch
Amazon,
Entwicklungsunternehmen, Accenture,
but
Capgemini.
also
Wenn ich mich da
Accenture
bewerbe als
and
ITler,
other
als
development companies.
Softwareentwickler,
If
wie
I
gesagt, ich komme aus der IT
apply for a
ursprünglich
job
und
as an
der
IT
Recruiter fragt mich,
engineer,
was
say
soll im
this is my
Prinzip
background,
der
and the
erste
recruiter
Punkt in Design
asks me
Principles?
what's supposed to be
Und
the
ich
first
weiß nicht, was so das
component or the
Prinzip
first
sind, dann kann ich
principles,
den
and I
Raum
don't
direkt verlassen.
know, then
Also
I can
so
just
sehr
leave the room.
verankert sind diese
So
Themen in der Softwareentwicklung. Wenn ich
IT
gefragt werde vom
goes
Technical
and
Recruiter, was ist
principles
das
go down that deep
Softwarearchitekturmodell
in software
MVC? Ich kann
developing.
es nicht,
And
ich
if
kann es
they
nicht
ask
erklären,
me
habe es nicht
what
gehört, dann kann ich den
MVC
Raum auch
is,
gerade wieder
and
verlassen.
I've never heard of it,
Was ich
then I
damit sagen
can
möchte, ist,
walk
dass die
straight out of the room again.
Prinzipien,
So these
die
are
kennt ein
very, very
Softwareentwickler, wenn er in der
common and
Softwareentwicklungswelt
current
arbeitet.
principles. Any software
Und
engineer
was ich machen
knows
möchte,
these
ist diese
principles, and
Prinzipien
what we
stärker
want to
in die
do
AX-Welt hineinziehen, weil
is
die haben eine
integrating these principles
Daseinsberechtigung,
into
die
AX because they have
Daseinsberechtigung ist,
their
dass ich
reason of
Projekte
being there. The
besser
reason of being there is
strukturieren
that
kann. Und wenn ich
projects
später in einem Projekt
can
eine
be
Änderung
designed in a
machen
better way,
möchte,
because if we want to
dann darf
change
diese
them
Änderung nicht viel
later
länger
on, then
dauern,
this
wie wenn ich
change
das zu einer anfänglichen Phase vom Projekt
must
mache.
not take much
Das
longer
Projekt muss
than
jedenfalls
including it
testbar
from the
sein. Das ist auch
start.
das Ziel von
And it's very
Design-Prinzipien, Software
important
Architecture Models, weil
to
diese
have
Prinzipien
a
wollen dafür
model
sorgen, dass ich
based on principles and components that can be tested in themselves. So quality assurance can be secured, and that the double checking principle makes sure that everything is fine and that we can use test data to see whether what we want to do is working or not. And then there's a couple of things that come on top. Expanding the project, for example, and going by component or layer to continue the work. The principles and architecture models you can Google and find out on. This is a bit IT specific if you search for them. We try to bridge this gap and try to apply the principles to AX Semantics. So that's a basic model called Solid. So Solid is shown here on the chart and what it means. It's an acronym. We haven't gone into the detail here because this is a meetup, but you might want to read about the different responsibilities we've designed here, or what the different principles mean here. SOLID stand for the items here, single responsibility. That's S, that's when I code something. And when I define a responsibility in a task in a software project, then there should be one object assigned to one component and only to one responsibility, and one object shouldn't be responsible for 10 things in one go. Because if that's the case, then I could split that down to 10 components, and number 11 can unite them all, and we can work on each and every one of them individually if we split them. It doesn't just hold true for the software project, but also for project management as such, because if I'm the project manager and I know what the requirements of my customers are, and I can split these into smaller packages, then in an ideal setting in Scrum, when a project team can pick and choose the tasks that they can best handle, then they'd be assigned only one smaller target and not be assigned to fulfilling the overall target. Then open closed, that's the next step after the single responsibility principle. Open closed means we want to expand the projects and not enclose them, because if we do the latter, then existing code from a software project may be destroyed. Liskov substitution is named after a gentleman called Liskov in the 1900s. This principle meant that components should be so built that they would be replaceable. Replaceability in the course of project management means that we so build up a project that team members can be exchanged in dedicated points. If we have a project team made up of 4 people and one member of the team cannot be replaced, let's say I work together with Saim, and he does the strategy of the project, but the next day he gets run over by a car. What will we do then? Oh, I hope he won't. Oh my goodness. Well, of course not. That's the classical example we often use in software development to say what happens when one team member gets run over. How can we hand over responsibilities when the person might have passed away? So replaceability is very important in technical terms and also in human capital terms. It doesn't mean that I wouldn't want my team members to be part of that team. I don't want to chuck them out. It's just rather about making sure that a project is properly documented so that tasks can be passed on, and that in the case of somebody being ill, we can still fulfill the task. Last 2 principles are interface segregation. This is really about splitting up interfaces or responsibilities or roles, splitting those, breaking those down into smaller packages. This, and the last point is the dependency inversion. I want to have dependencies down, not up the line. This goes very deep down into the subject matter, but basically it's about breaking down the project into the right chunks or the right sub-packages. So this is what solid is all about. This is the principle we follow in software development, in coding. Any IT engineer must be familiar with that. And as we apply this principle, our customers are satisfied. Usually, we speak to our clients about things this way. Also, we explain to them that we use AX and what that means, and it's been working very well. So we have built up our own architecture model on the grounds of the solid principle. So design principle software architecture model, we took the design principles, that's abstract requirements, and we have channeled these in an explicit model. And that model, this is the layer I was talking about. So we do split it quite clearly. On the upper layer, we need to structure accordingly in order to be able to break down into individual segments. In the middle layer, we've got the complex data that the writer can reuse in order to generate nice text. Okay, so I can reuse a layer, I can do many things with it. So the reusability is very important, and that's the classical principles. We have reusability and extendability are very important principles. That's the idea here, that we can build from the bottom to the upside, so we can reuse in other parts as well. The advantage here is that a module, when it's made up of a number of little code segments, can be better understood than a program code. When we have a module and the module can list all the colors of my product, like with legal, then that's easier to understand than the program code. So the advantages, what are these? This is the reason why you're here. So what's in it for you as you apply it? There's 3 different points in which we see major advantages. That's in communication. We see major advantages here when there are common guidelines and rules within a team, then we're quicker because we've got these rules we can abide by. The modules and the functions are easier to plan for, easier to plan and estimate. For example, when a customer comes in who's comparable with a previous customer, then we're happy because we can apply the knowledge we've already gathered, but it doesn't have to be all in fashion, for example. We can also have customers from different segments. We can have a range of plus or minus 20% of comparability, and then rules lead to consent. We can easily avoid differences when we have rules that we abide by, because it's easier to agree on how to develop a project. And it's easier to train someone also in that case. After having managed so many projects, then I know that we need a proper risk management. We like to do risk management. We take a look into the problems that we might face in the development. We don't do this at a project level, but within the software, because we can see at an early point, okay, dear customer, dear manager, dear team lead, here's a potential risk. For agile project settings, that's good, because this way we can work in parallel, because we can define components, we can build that in a fine granular mode, we use the same components, And these module projects are compatible with the agile project settings. Very important. Number 3, the transferability. What we can reuse across projects is so important. When I used to be a client, I couldn't be bothered starting from zero every time and writing the code again and again. But I tried to copy puzzle the code and adapting that for a project. And that made absolute sense. Components can be reused and adapted within or across projects. So that's a number of benefits. So the disadvantage is you have to get familiar with it, even though it's not rocket science. But the advantages are definitely in the majority. If that wasn't the case, the big software companies wouldn't do it this way. And these big projects they run wouldn't work if the benefits weren't there. I can only recommend that you use the time. We use a certain portion of the budget to not just lay the foundation, but also to do the planning, to do the drawing, and also for projects with a reduced budget. If a customer says you have less time, then we always use 5 to 10% of the budget to do the analysis and planning phase. This is because we can be more agile this way. And this way we can communicate at an early point in time if we need more budget, for example. And the cooler thing is to have flexible budget projects, because we can take our time to analyze, plan and lay out the project requirements, and we can tell customers we need that and that long. But one way or another, in the end, it's the same. We need some model we use for the planning after laying out the project. Planning and communicating is so important. So that's the biggest benefit you have in project management. Let's come to this slide now. I've really addressed all these points already. We've got many advantages. We have a great reproducibility of products. We can use what we've done before. And here's the cool thing on top, the modular setup with AX Semantics means that you can use more than 110 languages. And this is why we so built the model that access to foreign languages is so easy. And I would like to show this to you. And I would like to guide you through the OSI model, organize, serve, implement, and how to build in a translation into that. So we'll take another 2 to 3 minutes to show you that part. So, sorry? Do we have 2 or 3 more minutes? Yes, we can give you a couple of minutes more. Okay, so we'll jump right into this. This is the transform area. Most of you might know it. That's for the AX appliers. Here on the left-hand side, I'm on root level. That's the upper level, the highest level of any project. And what we do here is that we've got the sticky notes we use to delineate certain areas on the layer, but also in order to make notes. Here's the description area. That's where we split down the project into the structure. We've organized it, and for every sentence in a product description, for example, that comes out, there's one subgraph or one folder, and I can jump right in. I can put in text blocks. That all works perfectly. And thinking of building a house, then there's things you have to take a look at, like exhaust air, water, and power supply. And we do just the same in our project. here specifically in our case, here's data processing steps that are needed across the full project that are not sentence specific. So here's a general area that regards the whole project on the left-hand side, and the rest is in a modular setup on the right-hand side. So clicking on Enter Sys graph, then I come to the serve layer. That's the deliverables. And I go on Enter, and it looks like this. Here's where you put in the data, processing from left to right. On the right-hand side, there's the variables. And who generates the texts has the information they need. And here we have a breakdown into more subgraphs that are responsible for the tasks like putting up phrases or transforming data, the random selection of some data. Then we have to do a resorting, do calculations, and we put that one layer deeper into the implementation layer. And I spoke about multilingual projects, which is so easy. For example, we might jump into a language subgraph, a corresponding module. At first sight, it doesn't look so complicated. There's a lookup table in it that we use to translate into a number of languages, into German, into Spanish, etc. So a short time ago, we had a webinar on translations. And here's another example. Here's a possibility to implement phrases. We go into the implement session, we enter phrases, and beyond that, we come to a result, which in the end leads to a variable and to a text segment that can be inserted. So this is the upper layer again. Middle layer is for delegating and passing on data. And then there's the last layer, the implement layer. That's the subgraph on that level. And on the second level, anything that's a subgraph there sets the specific implementation modes, and it's absolutely handy to use. So this was the quick run for you, our OSI model, in which we have given it some thought to transfer classical coding to AX semantics. So here's my contacts. That's the final slide. Great. Sorry, Jan. Jan, so we're happy to take your questions now, and I would like to start by asking you a question. Jan, you've been a very calm presenter. I don't know whether you've been able to get it across, but please give us some hints to where the OSI procedure comes from. Well, OSI is a name we gave this model, but we have not reinvented the wheel here. In software engineering, we can program websites, smartphone applications, etc. And from this area, this type of architectures come from that do split up components in a number of components. So there's one thing that sort of resonated with me. It makes it clear what one of the central targets of project management is on the grounds of AX semantics. That is the fact that adapting a software or a training to start the project shouldn't take more time than in the middle of the project. That's maybe a very central statement. And through the separation of logics and the layer model that you introduced, I think we were able to see this very well in the live example. You stopped the spaghetti monster by doing a clean mapping of the layers and assigning the lookup tables two
Kann man das so
phrases.
verkürzt darstellen?
Can
Ist
we
das
say
eins
it
der
this way?
zentralen
Is this
Punkte,
one
dass
of
die
these central
Wartbarkeit des Systems
aspects?
quasi auch in der
The
Zukunft so niedrig
maintenance
bleibt wie am Anfang, das Projekt aufzusetzen?
Das ist definitiv so.
requirements stay
Ich bin
low,
ja auch ein
just
Freund
like at the
von
beginning of the
Messbarkeit. Ich habe
project?
jetzt
Yes,
ganz am
that's true.
Anfang am
And I
Anfang
love
nicht
to measure
mitgemacht,
things. I did not
Erfolge
join the
mit
poll in the
gemessen, aber ich
start,
als
but to
Datenwissenschaftler, ich messe alles,
measure
ja.
the success as a
Und wir
data
haben
scientist,
ganz
I
am
measure
Anfang, als wir
anything.
AX Semantics
And
gemacht
right in the
haben,
start, when we
hätten
started
15 bis
to work with
20 Minuten
AX
im Schnitt
Semantics,
gebraucht,
we
eine
would
kleine
need
Änderung
15 to
durchzuführen.
20 minutes
Jetzt, wo wir
to
das Usi
implement a
machen, brauchen wir
minor
natürlich 5
change. And
Minuten,
now
alle
with
wichtigsten
OSI,
Änderungen zu
it
machen.
takes
Ne?
us 5
Dann ruft der
minutes
Kunde an und sagt, ich
max.
brauche jetzt den Text
Client
so
calls
anders.
in,
Dann sage
says,
ich
I
dem
need the
Entwickler,
text in a
hier,
different
das ist
way.
die Kundenanforderung.
So I
Der
tell
schreibt
the
in 5 Minuten
developer,
zurück,
this
ist
is the
erledigt, ist
customer's
fertig,
requirement.
inklusive
And
Login
5
in der
minutes
Power
later,
Plattform.
including login
Und
and
das ist
logout from
natürlich
the
eine massive
platform,
Zeit.
they say they've already done it. So that's a massive
Jetzt ist es
time
natürlich so, man
saving.
muss das lernen. Also
So
der
now
Anfangsaufwand,
you
ich
need
muss
to
mich
learn it. There's
mit
an
dem Verfahren,
initial
mit dem Schichtenmodell
working
auseinandersetzen.
expense
Wie hoch
or the
setzt du
time you
diesen
need to
Lernaufwand
take in the
an, um
beginning.
zu
So how much time
sagen,
does it take you
das
in the
kann man
beginning
danach anwenden?
to learn
Theorie,
it
ich glaube,
and
man
to
muss dann
say
sicherlich
I
noch
can
üben
apply
und
the
noch öfter
theory now because it might
ausprobieren, aber
need some
wie hoch würdest du
exercising,
den
some training.
Ausbildungsaufwand sehen?
So how
Fängt ein
much
White Paper, ich
time
lese
does
das
it
durch und bin
take?
nach einem halben Abend fertig.
Do you read the
Darf ich
white
das sagen?
paper and after half a
Wir
night
brauchen
you're done?
circa 4
Well,
Wochen, um
I think
so
it's
eine
4
der
weeks or
einstiegenden
so to
Übungen in
train.
AX Semantics zu
That takes
entwickeln, um
us to
Kundenprojekte
train
mit
our
Usi zuverlässig
staff
umzusetzen.
members
Ich denke, dieser
for
Monat, den
their
wird
work with
brauchen.
AX Semantics. I think it's
Aber
around a
Beschäftigen
month
sind.
you need to
Vollzeit?
take.
Oder wie
Nein, nicht Vollzeit, nee.
So
Wir
is that
sprechen
full
da
time?
von 1 bis 2 Tagen Entwicklung.
Well, no, it's 1 to
Der
2 days of
Fokus ist wirklich die
development work. The
Disziplin.
focus is really the
Weil auch
discipline, I
Software ist
think,
schön, ist gut. Und
because a
das Schöne
software
ist
is a
ja auch,
good
dass er
thing.
nicht
And the
vorschreibt, wie
good
man
thing is
entwickeln muss.
that
Ja.
there's no
Und das Schwierige ist, hier
prescription on
Disziplin
how to do the
aufzubringen und sich
coding.
selber
The
Regeln
difficult thing is
aufzuschreiben.
to
Ich muss
be
das und das
disciplined
auch
and to
noch
tell
umsetzen. Ich muss
yourself,
mir
you need to make
vorhinein Gedanken
yourself
machen,
the
was
right
da später
rules. You need to
stehen
give
wird.
it
Ja.
some thought
Und diese
in the
Disziplin ist
beginning,
erlangt.
at the outset
Das
of
kostet
what you want to
Zeit
do
und
later,
wir
and
entwickeln
that
uns da ja
takes
auch
time.
ständig weiter. Wir sind jetzt mit dem
We've been
OSI nicht am
evolving all the
Anfang. Das
time,
heißt,
and
das OSI bietet die
OSI is
Richtlinien,
not
so
done yet,
Leitplanken, ne, dass ich von
but
der Spur abkomme,
it's only
um dann wieder
starting.
meine
It
Regeln
just
einzuführen,
serves
wie ich das mache.
as a
Das
guideline
OSI
for
ist
us.
was, worum geht's, ne, und wie ich
OSI
das
is
mache, das liegt dann
the
auch später im
subject
Ermessen
matter as
des
such,
Einzelnen, ob ich da jetzt eine Subgraph mache, ob ich 3
and
Subgraphen mache.
whether
Das
we do
ist zum
one
Projekt
subgraph
passend
or
und muss
3
auch zur Zeit
subgraphs,
und zum
that
Budget
depends on the
passen.
requirements and the time and the
Sehr
budget of the
schön.
project.
Gibt es denn noch
Thank
aus
you
dem
very
Publikum
much.
Fragen
So are there any questions from the audience at this
direkt an den
point
Jan und auch zu dem
for Jan
OSI-Verfahren?
and also on OSI?
Ich sehe hier gerade von Oliver Heller
Oliver
einen
Heller,
Einwand für
I
die
can see here
Diskussion.
Oliver Heller
Das sei nicht
is
interessant
commenting
für ihn.
something.
Er
He's saying it's
vermisst
not
echte
interesting for
Texte.
him.
Herr
He's
Heller,
missing
sehr
genuine
gerne beim nächsten
text
Meetup wieder. Ich hoffe,
examples.
die
Mr.
Überschrift
Heller,
war heute
we're happy to
stimmungsführend.
provide
Wir
that,
haben
and we hope
angekündigt, wir
that the
sprechen über
heading was not
Projektmanagement mit
misleading.
AX
We said we'd
Semantics.
speak about
Sie können
project
sich auch gerne
management
ältere
with AX
Aufzeichnungen
Semantics.
anschauen.
You're welcome
Ich darf
to
gerne empfehlen,
take a
der
look
Stefan
at our
Meyer
older
beispielsweise
recordings. For
über
example,
Meetup hat jetzt auch
Stefan
Beispiele
Meyer
gezeigt
of
und auch die
Meetup
Umsetzung
spoke
von
about
Herrn
hands-on
Meyer
examples
selbst,
and the
wie er das
implementation
im
Mr.
Projekt
Meyer did,
angewendet hat.
the way he
Falls
applied
Ihnen das
it
da
throughout
nicht
the project.
weiterreicht, Lisa, Heike
If that
könnten Ihnen
wasn't
Herrn Heller
enough,
noch die
Lisa
E-Mail-Adresse
and
zur
Heike,
Verfügung
could you
stellen,
provide
wo wir Ihnen
Mr.
da
Heller
weitere
with an email
Informationen mit
address
Beispieltexten
in which we
möglicherweise
can
zukommen
provide
lassen.
him
Und dann stelle ich
text
nochmal an
examples?
die Zuhörer die
And
Frage oder
then
die
I would
Zuschauer,
like to ask our
ob
audience
es noch
again
Fragen direkt an Jan
whether
gibt.
there's any more questions for Jan at this point.
Sehr gut. Jan, wann kann man die
Okay,
Schulung
Jan,
bei dir buchen?
when can this
Wie
training
läuft
be
sowas
booked
ab?
with you?
White Paper haben wir
What's
schon
the
gehört, das kommt. Das ist
concrete
die
hands-on
Aufzeichnung dieses
procedure? We've
Webinars, kann
already
man
been
zur
told
Verfügung
that
stellen. Da kann man sich
there's
auch
going to be a white
selbst
paper and the
eintragen.
recording of
Ab
this
wann kann man bei
seminar.
euch
But
die Schulung buchen und
from
dieses
what moment
Verfahren
on
lernen?
can the
Die
training be
Schulung, die kann man
booked?
jederzeit buchen. Wir bieten
Well, you
die
can
ab dem August an.
book
Es
a
wird von uns
training
ganz normal
anytime.
ein Zertifikat
From
ganz
August,
normal
we're going to be
geben, das
offering the
ausgestellt, hier
courses,
hast du schon gemacht.
and
Und das,
then we
was ich
will
jetzt hier
offer you a
gezeigt habe, das haben wir
certificate,
jetzt praktisch im Schnelldurchlauf 25
providing you
Minuten
with some proof that you did this
Diese
training. And we'll
Inhalte
do
mit wirklich
more
hands-on Beispielen,
detailed
dass man selber was
examples of what we
Programmierendes
did in this
mit
quick
mehreren
run through.
Textsätzen
We'll go through
erstellt.
examples and you
Zum
will
Beispiel
generate
bereits
your own
4 Stunden.
texts. And this takes around 4 hours or so. we did the main explanations, but the hands-down explanations and concrete examples will take some more hours. And you can also book hands-on training with regard to counseling on your live projects you might have. We would take more time in that case. We would sit together with you and speak to you about your project. We'll do the drawing for the construction of your building together. We will make sure together with you that you lay the right foundation, and then you can call in any time and say, we've planned this together, now have another follow-up question, and then we're happy to talk to you about that as well. Okay, thank you very much. Thanks for presenting your model. And thanks for talking about the way you do project management. I think this is a true benefit before it gets too confusing, because in a multi-language project that might happen. Clients have their requirements, we need to make our adjustments, and anyone who's ever been responsible of such a project knows how much work that means also later on. So Heike, at this point, I would hand back over to you. I would like to ask you now to take over. I think there's some final things we need to do. For example, looking at the poll. That's true. Mr. Heller had a follow-up question. Your system, he's asking, builds on GPT-3. Mr. Heller, it does not do that. It's not GPT-3. We have our own IP. The intellectual property is with AX Semantics. It's not a system from someone else. It's our own system, but please get in touch with Ms. Weidmann, and then we are happy to discuss everything with you in detail, also with the example tests. And that holds true for everyone. We just put the links to the Meetup recordings of the last months in the chat, and Lisa was kind enough to provide you with her email address in case you have questions that were not